On this episode, we cover the Joe Rogan Experience 2428 with guest Michael P. Masters. The No Rogan Experience starts now. Welcome back to the show. This is a show where two podcasters with 195 hours of Rogan experience get to know Joe Rogan. It's a show for those who are curious about Joe Rogan, his guests, and what claims they're making, as well as for just anyone who wants to understand Joe's ever-growing media influence. I'm Michael Marshall. I'm joined as ever by Cecil Cicirello. Today, we're going to be covering Joe's December 2025 interview with Michael P. Masters, and I am excited for this. So, Cecil, how did Joe introduce Michael Masters in the show notes?
You know, the abductees are excited for it too. So, Michael P. Masters, PhD, is a professor of biological anthropology at Montana Technological University, and the author of several books exploring the hypothesis that alien visitors may be human time travelers from the future. The most recent titles are The Extratempestual Model, a work of nonfiction, and the novel, which is a work of fiction, Revelation, the Future Human Past.
Absolutely. That's what Joe described him as. That's already exciting enough.
Yeah.
But is there anything else we should know about him here?
Well, he is an honest-to-goodness anthropology professor. I looked it up. He has one of those placards on the website for the specific university. He writes journals on occasion. He also writes books proclaiming that aliens are really just time-traveling humans from the distant future, and they're here to jerk off humans for sperm collection.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he absolutely is. So I actually knew about his work before. I've come across it before because he put out a paper about the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, which one of the writers at the Skeptic magazine that I edit wrote all about, and he references it in this. And that is more about the idea that aliens aren't from out there, but that they've always been here hiding somewhere on Earth. So weirdly, I'd already come across this guy's work, but none of the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis, the paper that he published, mentioned anything about harvesting cum. So this was a new direction for his work to take it.
Certainly was.
What did they talk about in this conversation?
Well, you know, they really spent a lot of time sort of massaging the topic of aliens, tugging at every thread, milking it for all it was worth. They have a very strong grasp on the topic at hand, and I'll let the audience come to their own conclusions, but it will definitely be a happy ending. That's all I'm saying. Basically, they talk about aliens. The whole time it's alien stuff, and cover some of the weirdest stories we've ever heard on Joe Rogan, ever told. It is genuinely baffling. The end of the show takes a turn for the absolute crazy.
Yeah, it really does. And ironically enough, this isn't a show where Joe is just asking questions, but it is a show with a lot of jacking off.
There's a lot of jacking off.
That's what this show is.
Absolutely.
So before we get to that main event, we want to tease you and edge you first by first saying a thank you to our Area 51 All Access Pass patrons. They are Chunky Cat in Chicago has had enough of this BS. They're Fred R. Gruthius, Angie Mackey. It's time, or possibly fennel, something Italian. Excellent work.
Nicely done.
It's Scott Laird. Don't thank me, your show is just worth investment. Megan Bray. Marsh argued the earth is flat on TikTok.
Love that one.
2
That's my
million
favorite.
views and climbing. Lucy Cortez, Stoned Banana, Ramtan Tickler, Matthew Cutler, autistic Twitch streamer, Billionaire Oligarchs, Darlene, Carissa Gunderson, Dr. Andrew Gibson, online physics tutor, Laura Williams, no, not that one, the other one, Morgan Gordon, Left Hand Voodoo, Stargazer 97, and Cindy Lynch. Yes, that Cindy Lynch. They all subscribed at patreon.com/No Rogan. You can do that too. All of our patrons will get early access to ad-free episodes every week. Plus, you'll get a special patron-only bonus segment each week. And this week, Masters will casually wonder whether Joe has ever looked into the JFK assassination. And it turns out he has. You can check that out at patreon.com/No Rogan.
Outstanding.
But now it's time for our main event.
It's time.
A A huge thank you to this week's veteran voice of the podcast. That was Erwin announcing our main event. Remember that you can be on the show. Just send us a recording of you giving us your best rendition of It's Time. You can send that to NoRoganPod@gmail.com. And remember to tell us how you want to be credited on the show.
Okay, so for our main event, we're going to be talking about his theory that aliens come from the future. They're human beings, but they're very different from us, evolved very differently. And they come back in time, and then they harvest eggs and sperm from human beings during the current timeline. And this is his theory, and he has a whole bunch of other thoughts on UFOs and how they all mesh together and what UAPs are and all that stuff. And we're going to get into it. We're going to start at the very beginning of the show, and it's them talking about how fiction is stranger than truth.
Disclosure Day. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, he was always like way ahead of the curve when it comes to the whole UAP, UFO stuff. You know, with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he had that French scientist that was essentially modeled after Jacques Vallée.
Yeah.
He's always been... I would love to talk to him. I wonder how much he knows.
Is that an accident? Was he fed some information? Was he a part of Disclosure the whole time? That's what I've always wondered.
I mean, what does that mean, right? Because there hasn't really been disclosure.
No, but it has to be a slow process too, right?
You think so?
I mean, the whole idea is that they're just sort of normalizing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neuro-linguistic programming, they call it, where you're slowly getting people accustomed to these ideas. Like the aspects of Close Encounters, for instance, where you have the radiation burns on the guy's face. You have a time travel component where these World War II soldiers get out of the craft with the little beans and the bigger bean. And I mean, just seeding our culture with those little bits of information that might help later on down the road.
That was like in the 70s, wasn't it? Like when was Close Encounters?
Yeah, I think it was.
Was it the 70s?
Late 70s, early 80s, maybe.
Yeah.
Either way, I mean, like a lot of stuff he's done. Like I rewatched what was it? Jeff Bridges' Starman, I think. There's a lot of elements of Disclosure in that, too. Like, I think there's just, I don't know. I mean, obviously, we don't know who's pulling the strings. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who's in charge. But it does make sense that if there is this thing that they know about, that we're supposed to know about, leak it out, do it slowly, get it in our culture, get it in our media and different.
We are going to try and keep a straight face through a lot of this.
No, we're not.
We're not. I try to be professional, Cecil.
You try every time. We're going to do our best.
So he mentions neuro-linguistic programming here. Just a side point, what he's explaining here isn't NLP at all. NLP itself doesn't actually work. It's based on the idea that you like repeat certain phrases and that'll kind of like connect with people in certain ways, or that you listen out for certain phrases they might use and try to mirror those phrases so that they'll feel warmer to you. There's no really good evidence that it's particularly effective in those kind of ways. But it's not what he's describing. It doesn't work, but it's not what he's describing here. Just a very small point. But what they're talking about here is Steven Spielberg. Now, they're talking about Spielberg because Spielberg recently announced a film called Disclosure Day, all about aliens. And that's kind of what's got them excited here. But they can't just be happy that an excellent storied director is going to make an interesting fiction film about a subject they're interested in. It has to be, he's only doing that because he knows. You know, he must know something. That's why he's making films about aliens. It can't just be that he's interested in aliens and interested in telling stories. It has to be that he knows that something is really happening. But Spielberg also made movies about dinosaurs. Does that mean that he knows that dinosaurs are secretly being cloned on an island somewhere? Is there really a big friendly giant who goes around blowing dreams into people's brains while they're sleeping? Or does Spielberg just like telling fun, interesting, fantastical stories at times? No, it may even be that he's using fiction to explore things about people. Why isn't it enough that he could just see believers in UFOs and think, well, that obviously isn't true, but what if it was? What would that story be like, and then go off and make a film about it?
Yeah, it really feels... This is not the first time we've heard Joe say something like this, that these people know what's going on. This fiction is actually the reality, and that's us peeking behind the curtain, right? They're revealing to the rest of the world that there is something back there, even though it's just a work of fiction that people happen to be interested in, right? Spielberg wants to put asses in seats. So he's going to find something that is interesting to a large group of people. We obviously know that Joe's audience is very large, and they probably seem very interested in UFOs. So if you could capture Joe's audience with a movie, that's great. You could make a lot of money. So I imagine that that's probably the angle that he's going for, more so than the I'm peeking behind the curtain. This reminds me of a bit. I don't know if you've seen Men in Black, but during the movie Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones reaches over and grabs a copy of the Weekly World News. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this paper, but this was a paper that was on the shelves in the United States for many, many years. And it was the tabloidiest tabloid, insane, not even pretending to be real tabloid, where they would have like, Bat Boy was captured last week, and there'd be a Photoshop picture of a kid with a chubby little face and fangs, and it was all just supernatural, Bigfoot and aliens. I was abducted by aliens. And Tommy Lee Jones in this movie grabs the Weekly World News, and he's like, this is where the real news is. And he starts looking through the paper to say, this is how we find our lead to find the next alien or whatever. And that's what it feels like Joe is doing here. He's saying, well, what we really need to do is stop listening to actual, sense and work our way through the most fictional account that we can find. And I want to just really quickly, before we get into this, because this show is not going to get any saner as we work our way through. This is just the beginning, and it's going to get crazy as we work our way through. And I think sometimes people think that this is a less important episode than maybe a political episode that we might cover, because it doesn't have the same sort of impact. But I'd argue that all these little silly beliefs are part of a whole, and that's something that we should pay attention to. These little silly things, they can make up a big juggernaut of just belief that we need to look at and say, hey, we need to contend with that. So I want to mention that this is also important stuff too. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about his theory. They get in, it's about a couple minutes of BSing, and we're about 13 minutes in, and they start talking about the theory that he has come up with about time-traveling aliens.
So first, we should get into what you do, because you have a very interesting theory. Tell everybody what your background is, first of all.
Yeah, all right. That does seem like a good place to start. My background is in anthropology, biological anthropology. My research mostly focuses on evolutionary anatomy, biomedicine. I've done some archaeology, various places around the world in Montana. But no, the main thing is that I've become known for advocating for this idea that UFOs and the aliens are actually our time-traveling future human descendants. I wouldn't even say as opposed to extraterrestrials, because I do think that's a component too. I oftentimes get pigeonholed. People are like, oh, you just think they're all time travelers. I don't. I actually say this all the time, but it doesn't matter. I do think there's a lot going on. But my background and the reason I approach this question this way is because there's a lot of characteristics of these aliens that look so hominin. They look just like us. And specifically what we'd expect to see in our hominin future if the same evolutionary trends continue into the future. So I kind of just tie those things together. And even the saucer-shaped craft seemingly are time machines themselves. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version.
Well, it's a theory that a lot of people have independently sort of come to, right?
Yeah, especially recently.
Have they? Would you say a lot of people, Joe, have come to that theory that aliens are not necessarily not extraterrestrial, but are descended from human beings coming from the future and coming back in time? That's something that a lot of people have come to. I don't think a lot of people on any real grand scale are agreeing with him here.
All right. Well, now they're going to talk about changing humans into aliens.
The point is, as time goes on, humans today are probably the most feeble version of humans that have ever existed.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And we're the most feeble versions of people that have existed within the last century, right? Like if you go back to humans from the 1920s versus humans from the 2020s, people have way less testosterone now, way higher instances of miscarriages, way lower sperm count. There's a lot of factors that are at play right now that are changing what a human is. And if you extrapolate, if you look at the future, you would naturally say, well, we're probably going to be very thin. It seems like there's at least some sort of a push to eliminate gender. Like gender seems like it's on the table as whether or not it's even necessary. there's all sorts of new technological innovations that are leading to the possibility, at least sometime in the future, of an artificial womb. There's genetic engineering with CRISPR and a lot of other different technologies that are being explored that we might be able to engineer human beings and then even create a complete individual human being without a mother, without a father. So if you thought about what that looks like in the future, like one of our problems on this planet is we all have different ideologies, different religions, come from different parts of the world. We look different. And human beings, as tribal primates, have a tendency to other. We other different tribes. Those are not us. We are us. Those are the enemy. We go out.
You rally around it.
But if everybody's exactly the same and we share one mind, then a lot of our problems go away. Yeah. If we no longer have to compete for resources, we no longer have the desire to procreate and to acquire land and to be, to have a territory, we eliminate a lot of our issues. And that's what these things look like.
Okay, thanks for laying out your theory here, Joe. So he starts off by saying that we are the most feeble. Right now, humans in society are the most feeble humans have ever been in history. Is that true? Like, are we more feeble now than, for example, the people of Dickensian times who were dying of malnourishment and living with rickets? I don't know that his premise is sound here. I've not done enough to look into whether his premise is sound, but I don't think he has either. I think he's just assuming that he thinks the world is getting softer and weaker, that this is a progressive trend that he's seeing, and he's extrapolating onward from here. And I think that's important because his version of what's happening with the aliens that people are reporting, they seem to look like an extrapolation of the kind of trends that we typically see in culture. Culture's moving away from strict gender roles, so when we see aliens depicted, they're kind of genderless and don't have gender themselves. Like, he's seeing an extrapolation of culture. But even if we grant him that still wouldn't mean that they were aliens from the future traveling back in time from a point in the future where they were the natural end point of all of these trends. It's just much more likely that they're products of our imagination. And as we project our own presumptions and expectations onto the shapes that we see and the things we interpret, I saw a thing. I couldn't define what it was. It seemed alien in origin. So what kind of alien was it? Well, the stuff that you see now, but more so. That's kind of what I imagine the aliens will be. Now, if, for example, the aliens that were being reported didn't look like the progression of any trends that we can identify and actually didn't look anything like us at all and had absolutely nothing in common with the kind of things that we can identify as parts of human culture, that would be a way more convincing sign that they were real aliens. Yeah. If people had reported something hitherto unimaginable that they'd see, like I didn't know any kind of being could look like that, and then I saw it, that will be a sign that maybe this is alien. But what we're seeing is taller, smoother, less gender going on, but other than that, basically like us.
Pretty much us, And it really feels like what he's doing is pumping his fears into these aliens, right? All the things that Joe doesn't like. We're becoming softer. It's all manosphere talking points. He's saying we're becoming softer. We're weaker. We have lower testosterone. There's more influence by culture to push to non-gender conforming roles, all these different things. And it all feels like a bunch of manosphere talking points to me. Yeah. So what he's doing is just putting all his fears into this thing. And it's so interesting too, because he seems to think that these aliens are the next step in evolution. Wouldn't he be embracing any of these things that he seems to be very afraid of? Wouldn't he say, well, if that's the next step, then I should be cool with trans people, I guess now, if that's the case. But instead, he's still pushing against it. So maybe he's the caveman in the far future that they're coming back to look at and put in a zoo or whatever they're going to do with him. I'm unsure.
I mean, people would argue he's the caveman in the present, let alone in the far future. But I think part of Michael Master's theory here as well is that in the future, something has gone catastrophically wrong with our biology, and that's why they're being sent back. So Joe maybe isn't on board with those trends because those trends, certainly Master seems to believe, lead us towards not just our own destruction, but the need to have a radical program of going back in time and interfering with people. And I think he's going to talk about that actually in the next clip.
Interfering is a great way to put it. We're going to play this next clip.
Yeah, you just tied together like a lot of really important points related to this theory. Aspects of why they're always interested in our gametes, why they come back and put that little machine on a man to collect semen, why they're constantly taking eggs from females and implanting fetuses, pulling them back out later. Like they're clearly focused on reproduction, gamete extraction, and one of the things that might be fueling that in the future, if these are future humans, let's just assume for a second, hypothetically, is that they might be having problems directly resulting from these trends toward self-domestication, these trends toward feminization, these trends toward reduced sperm counts, which is 60% across most populations of the world, in the industrialized world, 50% across the entire world. Problems with reproduction, in vitro fertilization, exogenesis chambers might help solve some of those problems, growing the fetus outside of the body. So yeah, and like you said, what do they look like? They look like kind of a hybrid between males and females to some extent, but there's still an essence of gender. Like if you talk to Whitley Strieber, he's with this being, he says in Communion that I had a sense that she was a woman. I don't know why, but I kind of sensed that. So it's almost like the essence of the individual, the soul of the individual still retains that sort of gender identity, even though our bodies are becoming more childlike, more gender indiscriminate. I don't know. But yeah, yet another one of those ways in which we might sort of grow together as a species.
Now, when you say they are extracting sperm, like how many of these stories do you take seriously? There's a lot of these stories.
It's a great question.
So I love that he just drops in and Joe doesn't bat an eyelid at the idea that they put a little machine on a man to collect semen, and Joe doesn't bat an eyelid at this. Yeah. This is just an accepted part of the theory. That the little machine. We've all seen the little machine that you get these days that those aliens come and put on a man in order to collect their semen. Also, he says they're constantly harvesting eggs from women. Like it's a real, like a hassle almost. Like, oh God, I mean, yeah, my wife was going to go to the theater tonight, but she had the egg thing with the aliens again. It's just constant with that stuff. They come by.
Man. Yeah, she's a free range. Then they just come by and grab her. I like that Joe's show is a safe space for aliens that identify as female. There's a part in there where it feels like a female, so it must be a female. Yeah.
Yeah, even to a point where he says they've still got a sense of gender, like they've still got their gender identity in the soul of the individual. Is Joe cool with souls having gender identities that differ from the bodies? Is that something Joe is totally down with now?
Yeah. Well, we know. I want to roll back to the sperm extraction. Of course, I always want to roll back to the sperm extraction, to be honest with you. But I want to roll back to the extracting of sperm here because we know that's true. That they do have this because in George Lucas's movie THX 1138, there is a scene where they extract sperm from a person using a milking machine. And so I know that that's true because fiction is real. We established that in the first clip. So I also want to mention, why come back now, right? He says in this thing that they're coming back to the past in their DeLoreans, and they're getting the sperm from us, but even Joe and he both say there's lower sperm counts now. So why not go back to like the 1920s and get the pure uncut stuff that you could get instead of coming back to now? Why not go back then? Why would they spend any time here if we're experiencing all the problems or at least starting to experience all the problems that the aliens of the future are experiencing, or humans of the future that are aliens? I don't know exactly how to describe them, to be honest. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and it's a major flaw in this theory. So, yeah, you've done a great job of highlighting that. I'll also point out it was nice that you went back to the sperm extraction rather than doing your normal thing of just skipping forward till we get to the sperm extraction, like skipping all the rest of the stuff until we get to the sperm extraction.
I really do skip a lot. I definitely paged through to see what I could find quickly. That's for sure. Fast forward the video. All right, so next up is this is talking about now. He starts on this path of being an anthropologist specifically because of a story he hears his father talk about. And this is about 25 minutes in, he tells that story.
I was actually kind of put into this when I was 8 or 9 years old, sort of activated in a way and put on this path by a weird thing that happened to me when I was a kid. What happened to you? Well, so I talk about it in my first 2 books, Identified Flying Objects and the Extraterrestrial Model, where I learned about a close encounter that my dad had. He was a veterinarian in Northeast Ohio where I grew up. And he was out one night on a call with another guy. So there's two people. As far as Jalen Hynek's reliability scale, has more reliability because there's multiple witnesses. It's also strange on his scale because they crested the hill. There's a bright light. This is an Amish country. There's no lights in Amish country. And all of a sudden, this bright light darts toward them, hovers just above their truck, darts back to where it was, and straight up into space, like at incredible speed. So this happened before I was born, but I overheard him telling this story to some friends one night. He got Whitley Strieber's book Communion, as most people did in the 1980s, and as they should, because it's a great book. And I walked into the living room. The book is sitting on the shelf facing out. And I remember like it was yesterday, I sort of stopped and there was like this light, like a white light. And then I saw this image in my mind of like an early hominin chimpanzee-like creature, a modern human, and then that archetypal gray alien from the cover with this information. What if they're related? What if they are us from the future? And obviously, I mean, that's why I became a biological anthropologist. People are always like,
so you saw this?
Yeah. It was like a flash, like a light. And, it's weird looking back on it because I know a lot more about these experiences. I've talked to people that have had these types of experiences.
Okay, so his origin story here, if you're tracking it, is that his dad had a UFO encounter that happened before he was born. But then as a child, he remembered hearing his dad tell that story to someone. And then he thinks he saw something where he saw a light and then something came into his mind, which was information, but was a question about the origin of humans. Now, I would say when you see something and it comes into your mind, that's normally a great sign that you've imagined something or thought something.
Sure.
It's not a sign of an experience. If you're seeing it in your mind, typically we call that kind of thought, imagination, that kind of thing, visualization. But he says, well, his dad, that experience that he had, it's more reliable because I had multiple witnesses. But two people seeing a thing that they can't identify doesn't double how unidentifiable something is, especially if they're not independent witnesses. If they knew each other, they can say, hey, have you seen that? What is it? I don't know either. Great. We have exactly the same zero amount of knowledge here. What we've got is the story that two guys have told each other about what they think they saw. And if one of them says, what if that was an alien? The other one isn't like to go, oh, I think it was a ghost. I think it was a banshee. I think it was one of the millions of other things it couldn't be. They're more likely to coalesce around a story. So it's not two independent witnesses. These aren't two witnesses. These are just kind of the same witness, the same story coming from two different people, as it were. And then they pass that story on to friends, no doubt more than once, which corrodes the details. The more you tell the story, the more the details are going to get corroded, the more the fantastical elements are going to be cemented. And that's the story that Michael Masters heard as a child, or whatever version of that story he now remembers that he heard as a child, because he's remembering himself the story that he thinks he was told, but he's remembered that multiple times, and along the way, the details get corroded and the fantastical elements get cemented. And that's his origin story. And now he's telling Joe about something he thinks he saw as a child, having been primed by a story he heard from his dad that he thinks he remembers right. But we're contesting both with the child's imagination and the fact that this guy spent more than 40 years telling and retelling this story. That's going to distort it every time, because every time we retell a story, we're remembering essentially the last time that we told a story, and we're re-remembering the things we want to focus on. We want to focus on the emotional impact. So we're telling how it made us feel and fitting the details around that without meaning to. That's kind of how we do it. But this is his origin story. Yeah. It's a thing my dad says he saw. I wasn't there. I think I remember him telling me at one point, and I think I remember how that story went. The origin story.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too is he says there was two people there, but he never mentions getting told the story by the other person. So really, it's one person telling us that two people were there. Again, that's even less than what two different people saying they saw a thing. That's even less than that. It's one person saying two people saw it. I don't know that that's necessarily higher up on his scale that he's mentioning here. I also want to say that just in general, our perception of reality is difficult. We're very selective, and we're bad at how we see reality. There's a video that you can watch, and people show this on occasion to show how bad eyewitness accounts are. They'll tell people to count the number of basketball passes. So they'll have a basketball and they'll say, count the number, and they show the basketball passing. And during the video, a person in a chimpanzee suit will walk across the floor, and people will, when you ask after it's over how many basketball passes, they'll probably know. But when you say, did you see the chimpanzee? Often people will say, I totally missed that. I was just paying attention to the basketball passes. So we're bad at deciding what to remember about a situation. We can't take it all in. We're not perfect. We're not perfect recorders of experience. We have limitations. And a lot of times when people say things that they saw certain things, they can be something completely different. And we're just bad at making those things up or figuring out what we actually saw. And on top of that, you can also make false memories for yourself. We know that's true. We know you can make false memories. So this could be a mixture of both of those things. So Joe asks the question now. He's gonna start asking some questions about this story that he just told.
What was the setting?
It was our living room. So it was like you come in the front door, and just to the left, there's this living room, built-in bookshelf, Whitley's books right there. I just turned the corner, saw it, and then just kind of, it just came. Like, I didn't know shit about evolutionary biology.
When you say you saw it, you saw it how?
In my mind. Just this white light.
Just an image.
And that image of the three faces. And then the question, could they be us from the future? And a lot of people are like, how'd you get into UFOs? Like, you're a biological anthropologist. It's the opposite. I got into biological anthropology to research this question of whether they could be us from the future.
Huh. So this, you felt like at that moment, it wasn't just like a weird thought or a dream. It felt like a message. Like, what did it feel like?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a tasking. You know, I think Rupert Sheldrake said it, that people don't have ideas. Ideas have people. I think that was like hey, go do this thing. And I did. That's why we're here now, talking about it. And obviously, you know, you got to be careful about like selection bias and confirmation bias. Like, I didn't go into this. I didn't go into grad school. I also didn't tell anybody in grad school I was there because they would have kicked me out. But I went into it with an open mind, but I was there to study these things because of that event when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So, okay, Joe does an okay job here of asking some reasonable questions. He's done that so far. He's asked a few questions. But the only one that I'm not fully on board with, he's very clearly, I think, hinting that when you saw this in your mind, how is that not just a thought? And he says, you know, how did it feel different from, was it a thought or a weird thought or a message? I don't know how a message differs in feeling from a weird thought or a dream. I've no idea what a message feels like. Sure. I'm not sure that anyone knows what a message feels like, partly because I don't believe in telepathic messages.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so Joe's trying to, you get the sense Joe's not fully buying this, but doesn't want to be 100% mean about saying, I don't think so, mate.
Yeah. I like that part where he says, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. That's actually a plaque you can buy at Hobby Lobby. It's right next to the Live, Laugh, Love section right there. You can find it. I think he's saying he wanted to try to push himself away from being biased as he entered the area study he decided to choose on. But I really feel like this is a perfect example of him being biased. He had a theory moving in, and I wonder how much of his theory has been pushed aside, finding evidence that might conflict with it, or did he ignore the evidence that conflicted with his theory about humans in the future coming back and why the Nazca lines exist? They talk about that in this particular episode. So I wonder how much of that he's pushed away to try to keep space for this idea that he still has and that he still maintains even after getting an advanced degree in this particular field. So I wonder how much confirmation bias plays into that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think there's an element of when you look back at, when you're where you are now and you look back about how you got there, you will form you will see a pathway that maybe wasn't as straightforward as it actually was. So if he didn't end up becoming a biological anthropologist, would he be looking back on that weird thought that he had and see it as a message, or would he have kind of left that aside? You know, we can sort of see our hero's journey. Everything kind of flows one to the other, but it only flows that way when you look back over your shoulder at kind of the steps you've taken.
It's a great point. All right, so they're going to continue talking about confirmation bias in this next clip.
Yeah, it is a problem, the confirmation bias. It is a problem with wanting it to be real. And I struggle with that because I desperately want it to be real. And so every time I talk to someone, you know, I've talked to a bunch of people that are, you know, air quote, whistleblowers. And some of them, I think, for sure, have been sent in here to distribute disinformation.
Yeah, no doubt.
For sure, because it's a great place to do it.
Yeah.
I'll listen to you.
Yeah.
I'll entertain almost anything.
Which is great. We need that.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, I mean, obviously there's people that are going to take advantage of it.
But I think it's also important for me to say I'm not convinced. I don't know how much of this is horseshit, but it's not zero.
No.
And when he's talking about not being convincing, I'm not sure he's meaning about Michael Masters' theory. Maybe he is here. But I think it's interesting that I get the sense Joe doesn't fully believe all of this stuff. I get the sense he doesn't really believe the sperm harvesting stuff in particular. But what he's suggesting here is that he's had other people on the show that he doesn't believe and thinks they were actively trying to spread disinformation, not just misinformation where they're mistaken and accidental, but disinformation, which is by definition deliberate. He thinks there's been people who've been sent in here to spread disinformation. So who are those people, Joe? Like, you can't say that and not have in mind somebody like, oh, I don't think they were just wrong. I think they were deliberately trying to throw people off the scent. So why aren't you saying that? Why aren't you saying, by the way, that person that I had on a couple of years ago, I looked into it, I think they were spreading disinformation. He didn't say at the time when they were on the show that he thought they were spreading disinformation. And okay, maybe he gets caught up in the moment. He doesn't want to offend them, doesn't want to upset them. He wants to give them a fair shake, or maybe he only finds out after the fact that they're wrong. But why not come out and name names as soon as you suspect them of having spread disinformation? Do it on a subsequent show. And I think the answer is, on some level, this is all just entertainment for Joe. That's all it is. He'll entertain anything. He says it here. And he always has to give himself the plausible deniability in case he decides later on that he does believe it. So we can't say, well, that guy I had on was wrong. I think he was here to spread lies. Because what if later he starts to believe that thing? So he's kind of sitting on the fence very carefully here.
Yeah. He mentions confirmation bias at the beginning of this. And then he says that he's desperate to believe this. Yes. And then he starts to say, well, I try to have on all kinds of people. Well, that's not true. And we know that's not true. What you try to have on are a bunch of people who all believe the same thing as you. That's confirmation bias. You're reaching out to a bunch of people who all believe UFOs exist, that UFOs exist, right? You believe that you're reaching out to people that believe that UFOs are alien spacecraft is how I should actually frame that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so what I think is happening is that you are confirming your own biases consistently throughout the programming that you're creating for the people in your audience. You're not having on someone who has the exact opposite thought, who says those things have no evidence for being anything other than phenomena we can't explain that are probably perfectly explainable if we had all the right information about what was happening. And he doesn't do that. And so I think it's a perfect example of confirmation bias, even though he's calling out confirmation bias as a bad thing at the beginning of this clip. So they bring up how aliens travel and how these gravity bubbles may actually be temporal bubbles too.
So when we're seeing this, we are imagining what we can do. And we're sort of saying, well, what would be an advanced version of what we can do? And what this technology is something that's levels of magnitude beyond even our theoretical, like any sort of idea that we have currently about, potential future timelines of technology.
Yeah.
There's no one talking about gravity bubbles that allow you to instantaneously traverse immense gaps in the universe.
Well, they might be talking about it behind closed doors at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Right.
And have been for 70 years,
yeah, that's
give or
the problem.
take.
That's the real problem with disclosure. Like, how much progress could we have made if they had opened up all this stuff?
So, yeah, it feels like at this point, Joe is back on board with Michael's story here. Even if he disbelieved all of that sperm stuff, he was willing to swallow it if it means getting to this stuff right here. He's found common ground, essentially.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, like, we covered the Dan Farrar show where he talked about how UFOs are able to travel that fast because they're in sort of these gravity bubbles that sort of warp time around them, and that's why they're so blurry, because they're in these gravity bubbles. But his argument is, nobody is saying that the gravity bubble propulsion is real, which is evidence that it is so real that the government has been covering him up the whole time. That no one's talking about it. That's proof of how real it really is.
And then listen to him at the end when he says, think of how much progress we could have made if we had access to that information. That presumes that information exists. That presumes that information exists and we don't have access to it. Again, Joe is just making this up. There's no reason to believe that any of that stuff exists. However, Joe is saying if it did, we would be much farther along advanced than we are now. Now he's going to ask Michael P. Masters if he's convinced of these things.
Like these things are real.
You think they're real?
I know.
What makes you convinced?
I have read enough accounts in researching this, and from people that I know, I mean, starting from when I was a kid, hearing my biological father's account, the way he told it. And then I interviewed him again in college to try to get more information because I was just overhearing from the stairs when I was supposed to be in bed. He saw what he saw. And then eventually I saw some UFOs.
What did you see?
I was kind of pissed, actually, because I started talking about this in 2018, and people were always like, you ever seen a UFO? No, never seen a UFO. I'd like to. And then finally, in 2022, it might have been late 2021. I don't remember exactly when. It was kind of warmish, so it was probably 2021. But everybody's in bed. I'm at my house. I live in a canyon, and I was having a whiskey, and I was like, I just walked up the canyon wall for some reason, like the hill behind my house. I don't really know why. I turned around and I could see these 5 super bright lights over what's known as the East Ridge in Butte, Montana. They're just like sitting there right over the East Ridge. I was like, well, that's not normal. Those aren't usually there. And they weren't stars. They're way too big, way too close. I would say they were probably within 5 to 8 miles. They were in the distance, but they were like there. And then I just kind of looked at them for a second. Like, oh, that's weird. And then one by one, from right to left, they just went, phew, phew, shot off toward the southeast at like crazy speed. Like the kind of, like in Star Wars or Star Trek, they hit hyperdrive and there's that little light trail, like just one by one until they were all gone. That I have no conventional explanation for that.
Wow.
But I've never been one of those people that's like, I need to see it to believe it.
Right.
Because I believe the people who say the same thing over and over. There's patterns that we can extract from people's testaments who have had these close encounters.
So, okay, he believed the entire time that this was true based on stories he'd overheard from on the stairs. So, these aren't even accounts directly told to him. Things he overheard as a child, which in my opinion lowers his likelihood of having recounted those details correctly if he's overhearing this kind of stuff on the stairs. But he always believed it. And then eventually, after a few drinks, he saw something that confirmed that he'd always been right.
Yeah.
This is just priming and bias, in my opinion. He was primed to look for something. He spent his life believing in it and having never seen evidence for himself. And then one day he saw evidence because he was primed to be attributing anything to that evidence.
Yeah, and he even says he's impaired while he's talking about it. I was drinking a whiskey. And then he goes up on a ridge. And let's be very clear here. If he saw what he thought he saw, 5 lights that seem to move very differently and strangely different than what he would expect a light to move, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that he saw something in the sky. It could have been floating, could have been much closer or much farther away than he thought. It could have been a tiny bit of reflective something or a string of something that was floating in the air. You have no idea what he's seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be fireflies much closer because you've got nothing to judge the distance. You've got fireflies nearby. You can't tell how close they actually are. And it seems like they're further away and much bigger, but they're not.
There's plenty of explanations, completely logical, rational explanations for what he saw. Years ago, I was out camping with friends, and we were drinking. We were, heavily drinking one night, and it was a pretty dark night. There was a mostly cloudy night. There was a moon, but it was mostly cloudy. And I remember going out to go to the bathroom. I got out of the tent. I go to the bathroom, and as I'm walking, I see in the forest ahead of me a floating, shimmering something. I couldn't tell what it was. It was shimmering. It was floating. It was clearly like head high, floating in the distance. And it looked close. It looked like it was maybe, 30 or 40 feet from me. So I'll go back in the tent and I tell the guys, and they're like, well, don't go toward it. Like, what are you doing? Don't go toward it. And I was like, I got to find out what it is. So I grab my beer and I start walking toward it. And when I got to it, what I found out was...
your beer. I love that you took your beer.
When I got there, I found that it was a puddle. What I was seeing was, because it was in the distance and it was farther than I thought, it was farther away, and that's how perspective works. It's sometimes your brain can't figure out where things are because your depth perception is off. I saw the moon reflected in a puddle, but it was shimmering and it didn't look like the moon because the moon was just reflecting sort of a bigger piece of it, and so it looked just like a light, and it was a weird shape because that's the shape of the puddle. And so my brain thought it was a shimmering, floating blob of some sort, and it was just the moon in a puddle that was far away from me. And if I were to just stop and not grab my beer and not go, I might have a supernatural story I could be telling you right now. But instead, I stopped and thought, well, what the hell could that possibly be? And I went to go look at it. And the thing is this probably has the exact same sort of explanation. Now we're going to talk about some alien limitations and gene variants.
The idea that they would be so advanced that they could genetically engineer a body and get to whatever state they are at where they communicate telepathically, but yet they can't solve the problem of old DNA, like needing, what do they need? Genetic diversity? Like, what is it? What are they trying to get out of us? Are they trying to get the source material instead of the old stuff, or instead of the stuff that they've had forever?
One of the arguments I made in my first and second books is that really since European colonialism starting about 500 years ago, we are all becoming one interbreeding population. So it used to be that you had different isolated populations, and then occasionally there would be gene flow that introduces new genes. If we all are just one population on this inbred island of Earth, where are you going to get new gene variants? And then you combine that with the things we just talked about, with the potential for things to go wrong with trying to make designer babies, or, the trends toward reduced fertility in men and women. And importantly, the potential that there could be some massive cataclysm that puts us into a huge bottleneck where there just is no genetic diversity at all. Like if you think about something that happened that wiped out a huge percentage of the population, and there are warnings about this over and over again with experiencers and contactees, they're like, there's some cataclysmic thing coming. If that were to happen, all of those problems we're already having, all of the trends that are already leading to us having problems with fertility in the future will be hugely exacerbated by a very limited gene pool.
So this, I think, is special pleading, first of all. It's like, well, why are they like this? Why are they doing this? Well, it could be for all these kind of reasons. We're finding reasons that we've got no kind of evidence for. But he's talking about this gene pool thing, about the limited gene pool. There isn't a limited gene pool. This is not a limited gene pool. The more people you have, the larger the gene pool. The more that they cross-mix, like the larger the gene pool. Isolation is what he's talking about here. Is it used to be that there was isolation and that allowed for greater gene variance. That isn't true. Isolation doesn't create a larger gene pool. It creates essentially multiple stagnant gene pools. That's kind of the end goal of the end result of total isolation. The more that people mix, the more opportunities all of our genes have to exchange with one another, and the more chance that harmful mutations get smoothed out by access to variation. So he's talking about the humans being on an island that is a planet. That isn't a stagnant gene pool when it's an entire planet's worth of species. Like, it hasn't been in the past. Why would it be in the future? Think of breeds of dogs. Like, isolated populations, we isolate dog populations through thoroughbreds. Where you control very carefully the breeding. So this St. Charles Spaniel, this Cocker Spaniel, they only ever mate with other purebred Cocker Spaniels or St. Charles Spaniels and things. Mongrels are the mixed gene pools. Now, the more a dog breed gets isolated through controlled breeding, the more likely it is to develop genetic traits that are harmful to it. And that's true for humans too, essentially, is that you think of that the royal families of the like 18th, 19th century, how they would only interbreed with essentially their own kind of relatives, and it would cause kind of issues here. So he's building his entire biological model around the idea that aliens are time-traveling descendants that need to fill in the gaps in the gene pool because the gene pool in future has gone stagnant because we all mix so much. But he's not letting the biology show him the gaps in that theory because he's wrong about what creates a stagnant gene pool.
Next up, they're going to talk about contactees.
So one of the cool things that's been happening, largely because of Ancient Aliens, your show, you talk about this a lot and it helps normalize it for a lot of people, is that there's a safe space now, like where you'll be talking about these things and somebody will come up who had a sighting when they were, a teenager in their 40s or whatever, and they never told anybody. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, wait, it's safe to talk about this? And that's so cool to see, man. And then it makes me realize just how many people have had an experience that's been bottled up inside. It's liberating to let that come out, and we're sharing information. And contactees too. Unfortunately, I started saying earlier, we're still kind of stuck on, this is changing too, but we're still largely stuck on the cockpit videos and the FLIR and the gimbal and the go fast. But people have been taken into these craft. They've had stuff put on their junk and their semen taken,
Junk.
There's a lot of no square touching that happens, anal probes, and we used to laugh at that, but that is such a common theme throughout these. And we need to recognize that these people are having real experiences and have been having them for a very long time. Let's move on. Let's talk to these people. Let's let the contactees and experiencers who have had the closest form of a close encounter you can have, let's trust them now. Let's listen to what they have to say. Let's be discerning, but let's keep an open mind.
And the thing is, that all sounds great, but you're not discerning.
Right.
You're believing that there are alien cum harvesters because someone said so that time. And like a few people might have said so. Yeah. They've all been probed. They've all had these things. It's all coming from the same cultural space. There's a certain... There's a limit to the number of places an alien can put a probe. So there's no surprise that it comes down to one of the same handful of orifices that the aliens are said to be probing. That's a failure of human imagination again, if nothing else.
Who says no to alien butt stuff, though? I mean, come on. Nobody says no to that. Are we kidding? You're absolutely right, though. He's saying be discerning, and you think, I don't even know that you know what that word means when you say that, and then you describe what you just described.
Yeah, I mean, he says, that the contactees have had the closest form of encounter, so let's just trust them. We shouldn't just trust them when all we have to go on is their word, and their word is that something genuinely extraordinary that cannot be explained, that couldn't possibly be true by what we understand about the modern current world, the physics that we live in. If they say that's what they experience, we shouldn't just trust them without any kind of evidence at all.
Yeah. All right, so this is the last clip in our main event. This is talking about religion and aliens.
And then you look at the Nephilim, and all kinds of different. Mbaba Wanawaresa, this story from Zulu lore, it's a fucking alien abduction, man. And they've been telling this story for thousands of years. So it's this woman, the sky goddess, who chooses a man to mate with and comes down, tests him to make sure that he knows that it's her. It appears in his dreams, communicates telepathically, gets him ready for this interaction. He's in love with her, never met her before. She comes down from the sky and takes him up with her on this rainbow of light.
Whoa.
And I made the case in my second book that if Antonio Villas-Boas had been able to go back with the woman that he had sex with, it's basically the same story. So this Brazilian lawyer is telling a story that's identical to this Zulu legend that's been told for centuries, millennia. I don't know how far it goes back.
How weird.
And the thing is, it's not that weird that people from lots of different parts of the world will claim to have been visited from people from above. Because the thing is, there's a very limited number of places for people to have possibly come from.
Yeah.
They can have come from up there, down there, or over there.
Yeah.
Those are the options for where people could have come from. Those are the directions that are possible.
Three different directions, yeah.
So, of course, some people have talked about visitors from up there forever, because wherever you are, there's an up. There's not always a down where you are, but wherever you are, there's an up.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of cultures have these same stories about humans interacting with gods and having sex with them because humans are horny. and they make up stories about horny stuff because that's sort of an important part of being a human is procreation. And the other thing too is he seems to be picking the myths that fit the things he wants to talk about, right?
Yes.
So he's talking about these things. I found this myth and it fits exactly with my theory. Well, what about the myth of the talking snake in the Garden of Eden? That's one we're not talking about. You'll talk about the Nephilim from the Book of Enoch or whatever, and they'll come down and they'll mate with human beings and there'll be a super race of people or whatever the Nephilim are. I really don't know and I don't really care. But in any case, you're picking and choosing your myths and you're saying this one is real, but there's a lot of myths in the Bible. There's a ton of them. And there's a ton of them about talking animals. And we've never seen a talking animal. We've seen a lot of animals. We've never seen a talking animal. And they always seem to forget that in those sets of myths. They only pick the ones that match their current theories that have to do with UFOs. All right, now we're going to move on to our undercard.
And the undercard's banging. The undercard's filled with fights.
So for the undercard this time, we're doing this very strange story that Michael P. Masters starts telling 2 hours and 13 minutes into this recording. And he starts telling this story based on Joe's experience that he had and had a dream that he told.
Yeah,
and
which if you remember, I mentioned this on a previous show. We were going to do a Brett Weinstein episode, but that got completely derailed because Joe spent most of the episode talking to Brett Weinstein about his dream. We're going to hear what that dream was.
Yeah.
That's what this is going to be here now.
So Joe starts by telling his dream because he's asked to tell the story of his dream again by Michael P. Masters, and then Michael P. Masters uses that as a jumping off point to tell an experience that he had at a conference. So there's going to be a lot of tape here, and there may not be a ton of commentary in between because all this tape is necessary to hear the final outcome of what he has sort of figured out and put together based on his experience that he had. So we're going to start with him asking about Joe's dream.
Can we talk about your dream too, by the way?
That's what I was just going to talk about.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, that's why I said I talked about it on Jesse and I talked about it here. That dream was the most realistic dream I've ever had in my life. It is a problem, and that dream was a couple months ago now. And I think any recounting of that dream is essentially me recounting my recounting of the dream.
Yeah.
It gets weird. But what I do remember was it was the most vivid dream I have ever had in my life. And that I could not go back to sleep, which is really rare. I am a good sleeper. I'm always go, and by the time it's time to go to bed, I fucking crash. I'm easy. So for me to not be able to go back to sleep was so strange. I mean, wide awake, just lying in bed. I mean, fully awake for an hour and waiting for it to dissipate. And I'm like, this isn't going away. I'm just going to go work out. So I just went to the gym and just tried to think about what just happened. Why was that so real? One of the things about it was they were shocking me and then laughing. Mm-hmm. They were trying to relax me. They were trying to get me to, at least my perception of it in the dream was they were trying to get me to calm down from the shock of interacting with these things that aren't human. They were human-like. They almost seemed like their skin coloration was like us, but maybe a little more tan, a little more not tan, but a yellow. Mm-hmm. More yellow than tan.
Okay, so this is the dream that completely derailed the Brett Weinstein interview. And it's great because Brett doesn't want to talk about Joe's dream, but they're talking about the fact that Joe had a dream and that's an episode, basically. But what I will say is, start of this clip, Joe's talking about how it's a while since he had that dream now. It's been like a month or something like that. And he said he knows that he's not recounting the dream. Now he's recounting the recounting of the dream. Points to Joe there, credit to Joe. That is how this works. When we talk about something that we're experiencing, especially something like a dream, we're just remembering the times that we've remembered it and recounted it. And as you hear Joe telling it, he's starting with the impact on him, the emotional impact on him. This is another way that we remember things and share stories of what we remember. We remember how it made us feel and the emotional impact on us. And then when we tell people, we're trying to convey that emotional impact, and that might influence which details we start to exaggerate, which details we start to focus on, which bits we highlight and which bits we omit, because we want to convey to the person how emotionally impacted you were by it. And Joe is showing us that that's what he's doing here too.
Yeah. Now, like most of the audience, I haven't heard this particular episode of Joe Rogan where he recounts his dream, right? So you went back, you chose this episode to try to test to see if we're going to listen to it. And we decided not to because you said it's just dream stuff. So we're skipping it. And so you know this whole story. I have no idea what he's talking about. I literally, it's like picking up somebody recommending The Expanse and you starting, 5 books in and not knowing any of the stuff that's happening before then. So I don't know what he's describing. I only know this dream from what he tells here. So it's kind of like expecting the audience to listen to every moment of you and not filling them in at all. This is actually bad storytelling.
Oh, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I don't think it matters, to be honest. I don't need to hear a detailed experience about the dream because it doesn't matter because it's literally just a dream. But they're
just a guy's dream.
They're not going to stop. They're going to talk more about that dream.
But they had a humanoid form, like arms, legs,
but
head,
very
face.
thin, very thin, like Michael Jackson-like, like super slender,
Early
like
or
genderless,
late Michael
genderless Michael Jackson, like the old days, that when he,
toward
just
the end,
really thin, like really thin, and I had no sense of what they felt like men to me. Maybe it was because of the way they were joking with. They were like, and they're like, just joking around, and I was
which is
like,
a very male thing. You wouldn't expect a nurturing female,
maybe a fun chick, like woo. But whatever it was, they were talking to me without talking to me, and there was some sort of communication that I was trying to absorb, where they were telling me to relax. And
telepathically, were they moving their mouths?
No, they weren't moving their mouth, but they were able to smile at me. Which is what they did when they, but I don't even really remember teeth. I just remember it being so weird that them scaring me and going, just fucking around, was like, I'm like, I got it. I was like, okay, I get it. You want me to calm down? And then they were telling me, just relax and try to take this in. And it didn't last for very long, I don't think. Dreams are hard to decipher.
But after that, when they were saying take this in, were they talking about being there in the environment, or were they communicating something? I got the
distinct impression that this was a first meeting. That's what it felt like.
Okay.
Like, maybe we'll see you again.
Breaking down some
maybe we won't. But I want to let you know that, if you wanted to introduce someone to a life form from somewhere else and you wanted them to have prolonged exposure to it, I would imagine you'd want to do it briefly and shockingly, where it felt really weird. And then at the end of it, they're not even sure if it really happened at all. Yeah. And then slowly, over a long period of time, when the person gets to adapt and they make a decision, it's time.
It's just like what we were talking about with the ontological shock. Get past that, and then you can move on with whatever is.
Because it was very brief.
Cool dream, bro. Thanks for the story. I had a dream. Hey, Marsh, I had a dream once that my cat could say, I love you. And it was like a parrot, and it could say, I love you back. Even though I was pretty sure it didn't know what it was saying, it was still very nice. It was still a great dream. I just want to share that with everybody real quick, since we're all sharing dreams.
We're sharing details of dreams.
We're sharing
I love
details
of
random things that our brain fired while we were asleep.
Yeah, exactly. The aliens are telepathically communicating with him, but they could smile, but he can't remember any teeth. And I assume he can't remember any teeth because all their teeth had fallen out because they were naked and they were at an exam at school they hadn't prepared for.
Couldn't remember their locker combination.
Yeah, exactly. I also love that he says it felt like a first meeting. Like, even the aliens want to repeat booking on Rogan because they know that that's really going to juice their brand. But more seriously, what we notice here along the way is Masters is asking some clarifying questions about what the aliens were like, what they were doing, what their form was like. And that might sound like what he's doing is asking for more information that Joe already had. But we also know when people are recounting things like this, recounting dreams, especially when people are like looking back at like past life regression or dream analysis in that kind of way, people aren't remembering the detail from their dream, but they're generating the detail upon the question being asked. And that means it's very easy for someone to even inadvertently shape the direction of the dream and shape what details are in there. And then say, hey, this person dreamt exactly the same thing or basically the same thing as this person over here. It's like, yeah, because the same person was interviewing them and guiding them in the same direction without even realizing they were shaping things.
Joe goes on to describe a little more about the dream and about what was happening in the dream, talking about a UFO that he was on.
What I do remember was the shock of it. It was different than any other dream I'd ever had, where it was like this is a real thing.
Yeah.
I was in a corridor, and the corridor was weirdly lit, like not lit in any way like, oh, there's a light and the light is casting light. It was like it was weird.
The walls and ceilings.
But it felt not normal. It felt like some completely different way of lighting things.
I mean, I will mention, just from doing a bunch of research on this, that one of the most commonly described things about people being in UFOs is the light. They describe the light emanating from the walls, the ceiling, everywhere without like a point of light. Did it feel like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But it almost...
Was there a curvature to the hallway at all?
There was. It almost had like an organic aspect to it. It was...
People say that about UFOs too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That almost seems like a living entity unto itself.
Yeah, well, I mean organic, like almost like I was in a cave or something like that. It was a part of Earth. It was weird. It was really weird.
What is he saying here? That it was lit up and it was weird? Okay, you were dreaming. Things look weird when you're dreaming.
Yeah.
It's not reality. So your brain tries to process things, and sometimes it makes things look strange. People have things that look strange in dreams all the time. And he's using this to say that this is how people describe UFOs. What you're saying about your dream is how people describe UFOs. But they also describe UFOs very differently than this. They might say that they're very angular or they're dark. What you're doing is you're saying this is a hit. I am deciding that this is a hit, not saying that that it could be a million other different things. You're saying this is definitively exactly how everyone else describes UFOs, and we know that's not true.
Yeah, it's not the Texas sharpshooter fallacy here is that Joe is throwing out a detail and Master's saying, yeah, that's what everyone says about UFOs. Give me another detail. Oh, that's also exactly what people say about UFOs. It's not working the other way where Master says, would you say it was more like this or like this? And then Joe had to pick one and is consistently getting the right one here. And this is an illustration of how recounting these things to people can build into the story and the mythos here. Because Michael is prompting Joe to share what he thinks he saw and then cueing Joe as to what it means. And in doing so, he's guiding what Joe remembers here. So when he's saying about, like, was there a curvature to the hallway? Was there an organic aspect kind of to it? Well, people say that. But then Joe's also saying it's like a cave, which if we'd focus more on the cave aspect of it, it would feel a lot less like a UFO.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
Michael Masters isn't going to focus on the cave aspect of it. He's going to come away with just having highlighted the details that seem most like a UFO. And the way he's talking to Joe, it's almost like he's a police sketch artist who's already got the suspect in mind.
Yeah.
Is that, would you say that his ears were quite large? They were large, were they? Okay, then we're going to draw large ears. Yeah.
The guy just is a bad artist and he can only draw people with large ears. It's like a whole thing.
Yes, like a police sketch artist, but it's one of those caricature artists on the street where everyone's got the same face. Did he have a skateboard with him by any chance? Was he carrying a baguette?
Okay, so I think this is the last clip or second to last clip where they're still describing Joe's dream.
Yeah.
And it was really vivid. Like the beings were very vivid. I can't remember how many of them there were.
Well, I don't think
there
you
was
should.
3 or 4.
I don't think you should write it off as just a dream. Like, I mean,
well, most likely it was just a dream,
but
right? Because I was sleeping.
What is just a dream?
That's the question. That's where it gets weird.
Like, I have come to think that is almost the baseline real reality more than this.
Oh boy.
Yeah, sorry. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about it.
Oh, you just cracked me. Well, maybe.
So, and to be clear, we haven't cut out the details, any of the details of Joe's dream. These are almost exactly sort of like point for point as it happens on the show.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of an edit where we take out a digression, but it's not details from Joe's dream that we've edited out. So what we've heard is the totality of Joe's dream. This, to me, isn't remarkable. This is a guy who's dreamt that there were some things that he felt were communicating with him telepathically in his dream, and there was lots of light, not signs of a UFO, especially for a guy who spends all his time thinking about UFOs as Joe Rogan does.
Yeah.
I'd be amazed if this is the first time Joe Rogan has dreamt about UFOs. But what Michael Masters is saying is, well, yeah, but dreams are evidence. Dreams can be evidence.
Yeah.
Dreams aren't evidence. Like, if he thinks dreams are evidence, that might explain why he believes there are so many real alien abductions, because he thinks that dreams are evidence of that. And I wrote that before he started telling us about a dream that he had one time.
Wait, and we're not really sure what exactly happened. Here's Michael P. Masters' story. Now, this is long, and there may be tape that we just play that we don't have a ton to say about, but it's all necessary to understand what he's talking about too. So he uses this as a jumping off point to talk about an experience he had in 2022.
So I had a really insane experience in 2022 that forced me to start thinking about what this is, what this physical reality is. Because I was shown...
What was 2022?
I call it a mini abduction. I was taken up... I was at a UFO conference. So I was taken up to this room that no one was in. I was taken on the balcony. I wasn't allowed to leave.
By who?
A woman who I knew, but loosely. Basically, I was downstairs. She saw, or they saw through her, because this gets really weird, that I was out of money. I was trying to get a beer at the bar for like $12 or whatever they charge you with these things. It was a Halloween dance party. This was October 14th, 2022. I was out of money. She comes up and says, hey, I have a key to the VIP room. So at some point, we end up on the balcony, and I'm just sitting there. I give up. I'm like, fine, I guess I'm just waiting for this Eric guy, whoever the hell that is. So eventually, Eric comes in, pulls his chair up right into me. Like, his knee is in my dick, like straight up right here. I start to get that. I'm very much fight and the fight or flight thing. And I'm like, like, who the fuck's this guy? Total stranger. Never seen him in my life. And his face is right here. He says, I sense that you're angry about this, but I need to be this close for this to work. And then it just all went away.
Whoa.
Perfectly fine. And they tell me something that was that same thing that they did to you in that dream. Something that they knew would shock me and make me pay attention.
Okay. So remember, this was introduced as being important. This is an important thing that we're going to be getting here. This big kind of experience that he had. So far, we've got a lady that he already knew. So not an alien, I assume, just a lady.
Just a lady.
Who wanted him to be on a balcony, took him up to a balcony. And then there's a guy there who wants to brush his dick with his knee, essentially. And somehow that relates to what happened in Joe's dream, because he's saying, and they did this to me just like they did to you. But the they and the they aren't the same theys here, because in Joe's dream there were some weird beings in his brain, and in this case it's a lady he knows and a guy with a knee.
Yeah. And I do want to mention that we have cut a tiny bit of tape here because there's digressions that happen as they work through. We tried to keep as much to the story as possible because they mention it. So this isn't the first time they used the name Eric. So they mentioned the name Eric a couple times in here, and it just wasn't perfectly. There was no way to cut
about
it.
How expensive the beer was.
Yeah,
we didn't need to leave it.
It was really it was
a
a big digression that we cut out. You can go listen to it if you want. This conversation starts at 2:20. In the actual show, so you could go listen to it if you like. But like I say, we're cutting a little bit of tape here because there's a tiny bit of digression that we wanted to get rid of. Now, this is the next bit. We're not cutting any tape. He's just continuing to talk about what they revealed to him when they sat so close to him.
So about 2 weeks before this, I'd been washing dishes, and I just decided I wanted to quit all of this. I was sick of doing TV shoots and podcasts. I was exhausted. Want to be home with my family. That's it. That was just a thought.
Just while you were washing
dishes. My wife's right behind me. Didn't tell her anything. Very next thing he says is, we know you've been thinking about quitting lately, and we'd really prefer you not do that yet. Complete stranger. I'd never seen this guy in my life. And he knows a thought in my head
that you had while washing dishes
from 2 weeks
privately.
Ago. And I was just like, how could you possibly know that? And they said, I'm going to use they because they used they. I wasn't talking to this guy. I was talking
like
through
pluribus.
some
like
sort of
TV show.
entity or entities through him. And they said, once you know who we are, you'll know how we know that. And I never had a telepathic moment in my life, but I thought future humans. That's all I could come up with because, like, this is what I'm doing. They didn't answer the question, but they did say, so you know how we did that? And I just go, uh-huh. Like, it doesn't fucking answer the question. But in that moment, it placated me enough to move on. And there was a number of things that transpired. We're out on this balcony. I'm in shock. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? How does this complete stranger know my thoughts? The conversation evolved. I was allowed to ask questions. They're like, we know you're frustrated. We know you're upset with this. We'd really like you to keep going. Is there anything you need? Is there anything we can help with? I was like, no, I'm quite happy in general. I'm just exhausted. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, yeah, we get that. We get that. We get that.
So, okay, he had a lot on his mind. He's been thinking about quitting and things. I mean, he's had this on his mind a lot. It was probably what he was thinking about a lot. So this is the kind of stuff that was just kind of going through his mind. Whatever would happen, it's going to connect with something like that because that's what's really significant in his brain at the time.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that the aliens in people's stories, they always tell them that what they're doing is important. The thing that you're doing, yeah, you're on the right track, carry on. The aliens never come down and tell people, do you know what? Give it a break. Try something else. Maybe this isn't for you. Like, AT never came down to tell you you're not going to make it as an artist. You should get a regular job. Like, that never happens. It's always like, what you want to do, the thing you want to do is so significant. You should just keep at it. It's always very affirming.
ET's like, you suck, but you can have a piece of this candy and that might cheer you up.
But also, it's not clear from what he's talking about how much of this conversation is happening out loud because he's talking about telepathic moments. He's talking about how I wasn't talking to them. I was talking to entities through him. So it's not clear, and it remains unclear whether there's some conversation actually happening or whether he's thinking thoughts and he's thinking that this guy can hear his thoughts. And that makes a massive difference as to what was actually going on here.
All right, no tape being skipped. He's going to continue on talking about this experience.
And then I was allowed to ask questions. I asked 3 different questions, and people started to come back to this room because the party was wrapping up downstairs, and they were starting to come back to the VIP room where all the free booze was. So that makes sense. And we're out on this balcony. These 3 women come out at one point, and this man, who now is like just right here, like eyes right here. I can't move anymore. Like, I lost the ability to turn my head. I'm just like laser focused. Said, can you close the door behind you? That was it. And these 3 women turned in perfect unison, walked back and closed the door. Nobody came out the rest of the time we were out there. Eventually got to the point where they're like, we came here because we need to put 3 things in your brain for some future time or times. I forget which they said. Do we have your permission to do that? And over the course of this interaction, I started to remember them. And I started to feel like a little bitch about complaining about being tired, traveling, hotels, flights, you know? And I was like, oh, that's right. I know you. I know who you are. Not that guy. I'd never seen him in my life. But I know you, and there's a familiarity. And this was like the breaking down of me to be able to get past that, to do the things that needed to be done. They told me what would happen. They said that I would continue looking, my eyes would be open, but this darkness would come from top to bottom, and they would put things in my brain, and I would see it coming in, but I wouldn't have access to it once they were done. Do you agree? They're very polite, extremely polite. Free will was conserved. Do you agree to this? Are you okay with this? And again, at that point, I remembered them. I recognized them. I was like, yes, absolutely. I agree to this. That's exactly what happened. Eyes went dark, still wide open. Eyes went dark, and I see this massive, fast stream of information just going straight into my brain. It was exhausting. It didn't hurt, but it was like really overwhelming.
I am happy that the aliens get enthusiastic consent. That's all I'm saying. I'm very happy that is a trend with the aliens of the future, the humans of the future, aliens or whatever. Very happy about that. And his experience here, listen to what his experience is. He has an experience where he sits down in front of somebody and they have this sort of mind transfer. But beforehand, he tries to make it more significant by saying that 3 people came out onto the balcony and this person said, hey, can you close the door behind you? And then they turned around and walked away. He implies that it's sort of some sort of mind control. It could just be them being polite. Because if someone were to say that to me, I would say, oh, well, clearly they're having a very intense conversation out here. This guy's face is in the other guy's face. Maybe they don't want to be disturbed. Maybe they're having a heart-to-heart that I shouldn't be involved in. So I'm going to go inside. I would think that would be a normal interaction that I might have at a party that I wouldn't think twice of. But he's making it seem like that was a mind control moment where he turned and looked at them and bewitched them and wiggled his nose and then they walked away.
And the thing is as well, there is a possible explanation for what is going on here, which is hard to, it's hard for us to say because we can't evidence anything. But this doesn't sound like he was in a great place.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like he was doing super great. And it could well be, and this is just a potential option, that he's having a bit of a freak out moment up on the balcony. This guy's really up close to him to try and see if he's all right. And 3 women walk up and the guy says, could you give us some space? Give us a moment.
Yeah.
And then they walk away because they don't want to be involved in that whole thing. They recognize this guy needs space.
Yep.
That's another possible explanation. And if all we've got access to is the explanation of the guy who's having the moment and not the people around him, it's going to sound like a very skewed version of what happened. So we can't know what this was actually like. But yeah, let's carry on hearing what he gets.
I have no idea how long they were doing this. It was,
you said you see it going into your brain?
I could see. It was like I could see. I don't remember it, but I could see and understand the moments and it wasn't just me. Like at one point, this conversation switched from being vocal to telepathic. Like we just started communicating telepathically. It was so seamless that I didn't even really notice it happen. And eventually I'm like, wait, we're not moving our mouths. We're just talking with our brains. But the woman who brought me up there in the first place was standing to my left with her hand on my shoulder. She would occasionally go, did you get that? Did you see that? That was important. Did you get that? So she was watching it too and saw it coming in as it was coming through this individual in front of me. And I could see it at that moment. I'd be like, Like I understood it. It all comes in. I have no idea how long I was in that mesmerized state. But after they finished, that entire room had 5 times more people in it. There was like probably 20 people in this room, all looking at us like, what the fuck is happening to Masters out there? Like what is going on? They lifted me out of this sight return from bottom to top, the opposite of what happened before. And I stand up, turn, walk through this room. It felt like my head was a bowling ball. Like I could barely even lift my head. And this woman, I think one of the ones that came out when we were on the balcony, put her hand on my shoulder, said, are you okay? I was just like, Walked past her. Fortunately, I was on that same floor, on the 4th floor of this hotel. Walked down, lay back on the bed with my feet still on the floor, all my clothes on, and just slept in that position for about 13 hours.
What?
Didn't wake up at all. And when I woke up, I started crying uncontrollably. Like I could not stop crying. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I had a memory of what happened the night before, but it was kind of fuzzy. And then as it started to come back more and more and more, I started to be like, oh shit, like that was real. My first thought was like, oh, that wasn't real. And then I was allowed to remember all of it. Everything before they put me in that state is like crystal clear in my mind. And I wrote it all down not long after that just to make sure I had, so it wasn't me recounting like you were saying. So there was actually like a written transcript of how everything happened.
So he was hypnotized by a guy who was controlled by aliens. It's getting more elaborate as we work our way through. Yeah. This is when I first thought about this. I thought he's probably getting texted by his wife and he's not responding. So then he's trying to tell her a story the next day about why he wasn't responding to all her texts.
Yeah, like honestly, we weren't there. We can't know.
Yeah, I can't know.
But it feels a bit like a guy who was at an event and for whatever reason had an experience where he suddenly thought that the person nearby was transmitting thoughts and questions into his mind and reading his mind, when in reality, I'd argue he's imagining this all. He says in here that they started talking telepathically, and it was so seamless he doesn't even know when that happened. So we don't know when in the process, the things he said that the person was saying, the person wasn't saying, he was just having that experience in his head. But because he's primed to interpret all of this through the lens of a UFO experience, he sees this whole thing as confirmation about what he already thought about aliens. But when you hear him telling this story, there's notes in it that you can spot. He's saying like he had a crystal clear memory of everything up until they started doing the thing to his brain. Then everything after that, they allowed him to remember afterwards. It started to come back to him afterwards, which means the most significant parts of this story are the ones he's remembered afterwards, he's put together afterwards, which I'm not convinced would mean that the details of this are as accurate as he thinks they actually are. And the wildest bit of this so far for me, He tells that entire story. He said, and I was just so exhausted, I went and slept for 13 hours. And Jaws goes, wow. Like, the most impressive thing is a guy slept for a really long time, and not that he had psychological beamed information from an alien species.
Or he passed out, right? Like, the other thing, too, is this could have just been a drunken escapade and had a moment where he thought someone was talking to him, and the person who put their hand on their shoulder were like, are you okay? Meaning, maybe you were a little intoxicated. Are you all right? Again, if you just think about this as like a normal person would think about it, none of this seems to add up at all.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know necessarily drunk. He will talk about not having drunk very much later, but again, his memory is very clearly impaired. He's saying it himself, and he'll talk about other substances too.
Yeah. Continuing on.
But maybe if, let's just say hypothetically, you were on a craft, they were breaking you down in the same way they did me to try to get you, whether now or in the future, like you said. It might have been an initial encounter where there's something more going to happen later. But maybe there was more to it that they just didn't let you have conscious memories of. Like, they told me I wouldn't remember what they put in my brain, and I don't. Which is, just a second, this is what blows my mind, man. This is fucking insane. It's my brain.
Right.
They put things in there. The ability that they can even do that in the first place is nuts. But I don't have access to it. It's really wild.
How do you know it's in there then?
I watched it come in.
Right,
I know it went in. And they told me that it was going to come in. And I saw it happen. But then once it's in...
Right, but does that make any sense? Like, think about it. If they're giving you information, what is the point in giving someone information that they can't access?
Well, that's what they said, though. They said for time or times in the future. It's time released. It's time stamped. At some point, whatever that was that they thought was so damn important to mini abduct me at this conference and fuck with me for about 5 months afterwards is going to come out at some point.
Have you ever considered the possibility someone dropped acid into your beer?
Yeah, I have.
Because that would be such a cruel thing to do to someone at a UFO conference. Then fuck with them and say, sit down, look in my eyes. I'm going to give you information now. You're like, oh my God, it's coming. Information's coming.
It is. Problem is I've done acid over 200 times. So I know exactly what that's
Maybe
like.
it was a flashback. That's what they say.
Joe is actually asking good questions.
He really
and he has
is.
some good explanations of why this might be happening. What I would love to do is question one single person at that party. Maybe the lady who put her hand on his shoulder as he was walking out of there. I'd love to question that person. Find somebody else's corroboration of what happened here, because I wonder how different their story would be to his.
Yeah, exactly. Two witnesses, two independent witnesses, and we've got a totally different story here. But yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't think someone other than himself dosed him with a psychedelic here. It is a guy who's taken acid 200 times and is having what sounds like a very trippy psychedelic experience. But now he's got this confirmation that his own experience was definitely alien, and now he's putting that onto Joe too. And if Joe wasn't pushing back as much as he is, Joe's dream could very easily be wrapped into that.
Sure.
And now we have two different evidence points that aliens are abducting people and putting kind of thoughts into their mind and telling them not to worry and visiting these kind of ways. This is how these things spread, and they affirm one another from these really flimsy bases.
Yeah. All right, next bit of this tape.
So it was some kind of experience that was very anomalous.
Extremely, yeah. And so here's another aspect of it. They knew my future. They knew everything about me. They knew my thoughts. That's how they broke me down. And they even knew where I was going to be the next day. They saw that it fucked me up and I was not doing well. Like, I wasn't crying because I was sad or scared or anything. It was just a physiological response to whatever they did. I'm walking down through the main corridor to give a book to a friend of mine, John Dover, Navajo Ranger. And that same guy comes around the corner, comes down, puts his hand on my shoulder, says, "Are you okay?" I was not okay. But I go, "Uh-huh." And they fixed me somehow. His touch on my shoulder released all of the whatever was messing me up. They knew where I would be at that exact moment for him to come there. He wasn't part of this conference. He had nothing to do with this. He was used as some sort of vessel or some sort of medium for this end. Whatever it means, I don't know, because the things haven't come out of my brain yet. But they are time-stamped for the future.
I completely believe you.
It's not a belief. But it's not a belief. They did it in a way where other people were involved, so I didn't even get to pretend.
I'm saying is, I'm saying I believe your story from you. I have no information on it, obviously, other than you telling me.
Yeah,
I believe you. It sounds like this is a real experience, but most people hearing something like this will automatically go, Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. One of the things he says in the beginning, he says, they knew my future. It's like, what part of the future? Because you didn't elaborate anything. The only part of the future they knew is that they came downstairs and you were downstairs too. This totally sounds like a psychotic break to me. It doesn't sound like any kind of anything else other than that. That's how I would explain it.
Yeah, it does. And it's hard for us to say for certain, but it sounds like something like that. It sounds like someone reading way too much significance into what in reality sounds like he was having a bit of a freak out for whatever reason. He was sat near someone and that guy checked in at the time to make sure he was okay while giving him a bit of space and making sure there's no one kind of around him to hassle him too much while he's like trying to level. Then he went to his room, slept it off. And the next morning, he bumped into the guy and the guy said, hey man, are you all right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what it could be. He's saying they didn't need to know his future to know where he was going to be the next day. You said you were at a UFO conference. Was that in a hotel? Could he have been another guest at the hotel that you just bumped into in the hotel at breakfast or, at somewhere? It happens. You bump into people when you're staying in the same hotel. But it's all imbued with such remarkable significance because it's only viewed through the lens of this abductee experience. It's affirmation of this abductee experience. And I do love that Joe says, I completely believe you, in a tone of, I do not believe you. Like, I know he's trying to sort of go, I believe your story from you, but other people will say, get the fuck out of here. But I don't think he does completely believe that this was evidence of a mini abduction.
Yeah, but he does go on to say, I think, use his story as a way to explain other things that he's heard. And this is a piece of that tape.
And they did.
But I want those people to imagine what it would be like if that happened to you. For me, it's easy because mine was in a dream, and I'll tell you it's a dream. I think it was a dream. It was the most vivid dream I've ever had, but it was a dream. It was really weird. I couldn't shake it. It really freaked me out. I had to talk about it the moment I got on a podcast next. I was like, this is something that I have to bring up right away because it's just...
And thank you for doing that, by the way. It takes bravery to talk about this.
But I was talking to Brett Weinstein, who's an evolutionary biologist. Like, it's not the topic to talk about, but I'm like, I have to tell you this because it was one of the weirdest things that I've experienced. A lot of weird shit. I've had a weird life. That was the weirdest. It was weird.
It took me a year to talk about this. I went down.
Let me finish here.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were.
But this is what for people that are very skeptical.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine yourself in a position where something like this happens to you. You're a regular guy. You're a mechanic for Chevrolet, whatever you are, and this thing happens to you. And what do you do now? What do you do with this? And who the fuck is going to believe you? You wouldn't have believed you. So why would you don't even want to tell people. It's that crazy.
Yeah.
And if these things are happening, they're not happening to 7 billion people, right? They're happening to select individuals for whatever unknown reason all over the place. And if that is happening to 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000, whatever it is, over time, these people have all of these similar stories. I get being skeptical. I get it. I'm a skeptical person with a lot of stuff. I go back and forth. I'm a believer, and then I'm like, shut up. I'm with you. I'm with you. But you gotta imagine what you would do if that happened to you.
Joe is the least skeptical person ever. Come on now.
Yeah, he really is. And I love that. You got Michael Masters saying it took me a year to talk about this with anyone. And I love that Joe talked about it with the first podcast guest he happened to have next, like against their will. It's like, yeah, a guy I barely know that well. I started talking to him about my dreams. So yeah, we are very different people.
Yeah. And he talks about how this happens to a lot of people. He says, this happens to a ton of people. And so we've got to take that seriously. Well, a lot of people see ghosts. That doesn't mean that they exist. This is the argument from popularity. Just because it happens to a lot of people say something is true doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, exactly. But also I think this is like a sign that Joe is just way too open to people saying crazy things and him accepting that they're valid parts of reality, because you've got someone saying like they saw this thing, and if there's enough of them, he thinks that's accurate. But it could just be that these people are all wrong. You know, what he's doing here is taking one anecdote that has very clearly been told in a way that does not remotely comport with reality or what actually transpired. If you were there, I imagine it'd be wild different. Joe is accepting that as evidence of something it can't possibly provide evidence for, and then wrapping it up with a weird dream that he had and calling that 2 data points. And it's almost like the subprime mortgage of UFO experiences. Like you take a bunch of really unconvincing stories that individually aren't
Yeah.
able to prove anything
What
at
a
all
great
and aren't
analogy.
like in any kind of way.
Yeah.
But you bundle them together and then you sell them as evidence of the extraordinary.
Yeah, it's great.
You know, you can say there are hundreds of examples in the bundle, and that sounds impressive until you look at any one of those
Yeah.
examples and you realize that this is a garbage
Yeah.
example that you should not be betting your house on.
Yeah, that's a great example. I like that a lot. All right, this is the last clip in our undercard. This is at the very end of the show. They're sort of saying their goodbyes, and this is that clip.
And I mean, that's what's important. It was really hard for me to talk about this. It really fucked me up for like, I'm going to say 5 months, but it was way more than that. And the reason I bring this up is because of your dream and the shock factor and what it means for conceptualizing reality, this physical reality versus what we write off as being dreams, a dream reality. I have come to think that that is baseline, that consciousness is fundamental, it's foundational, and this physical reality is built off of it. And I've heard a lot of other scientists talking about that lately. So I think one of the questions that gets me is, why does everything dream? Everything. Every living organism dreams. And it almost seems like we're here for the universe to learn about itself and to have these experiences, because in source, there's nothing. There's just love and energy. That's it. And I've gotten to experience that. I was thinking in the shower the other day that I feel lucky because I've gotten to have near-death experiences without actually dying, because it's a very similar thing. And I go to that same place that people describe in these near-death experiences. That's real. That feels the most real. But you don't get to have divorces and people dying and car crashes and the shit that makes this life suck, but also being the only way that the universe can learn about itself. And then every night, what do? We empty the hippocampus and upload that information. Near-death experiences, people describe that review, the life review. So we upload it every night, and then at the end of your life, it's like upload the whole thing all at once, go to a different body. And the next time.
Wow.
I think your dream is just as real as anything we experience here, if not more real.
Let's end it with that. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
That was a lot of fun.
They don't actually end it there. He pushes them to keep the podcast open for a few more minutes while they were talking.
He does.
He doesn't actually end it there. But I think, you know, this is him trying to rope the piece in that he started with, that dreams are the baseline reality that we're living in. And that is genuinely unhinged. That's not, I mean, think about what you dream about. Like, do the aliens care about me uploading me forgetting my locker combination or walking around naked at the supermarket? They're just random thoughts. They're just random nothing. And you're trying to find significance in all these pieces and trying to wrap it all together in one bow, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And he says, like, why do you think every living organism dreams? Do we know that every living
That's a great
organism
point.
dreams? Like every single one of them?
Yeah.
Do ants and cockroaches and butterflies and RFK Jr.'s brainworm, they all have dreams and aspirations? I don't think they do have dreams.
Well, we know that RFK's brainworm tried to get him to go into that sewage pile that he swam in with his kids. So.
Let's wrap it up with that. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you very much. You're a beautiful person.
All right, here we are at the end of the show, Marsh. Was there anything good in this?
Yeah, so a couple of things. There's a point where he talks about Neanderthals and he gets really nerdy about some of the sort of details about them, and it all seems like pretty accurate stuff. We might mention it briefly in the gloves off, and that was cool to listen to. The guy does have some level of knowledge about things when he's not talking about this extraterrestrial hypothesis. Also, from a personal point of view, I miss having conversations like this on Be Reasonable. So from a pure nostalgia of having a conversation with people who believe stuff like this, it took me back to when I was doing interviews on that show. So yeah, I liked it for that reason.
I will say this. There are moments of this where the guest is pushing back against ideas about UFOs that I have heard or thought that I've heard Joe sort of swallow in the past. And one of them is those paper mache alien bone animal things that they've put together that look like little dolls. He says those are bullshit. And he explains exactly why, using his expertise in his field, why they are hoaxes. And that is a great part of this show. It's him exactly explaining why you shouldn't believe when somebody has a little paper mache thing that's made of animal bones that they say is an alien. And I think that was actually a really useful part of this show. It's also bookended by 2.5 hours of dream talk and humping aliens pumping semen out of your balls talk. So it's very, very weird to catch a good piece of this.
Yeah, it really is. Well, that's it for the show this week. Remember, you can access more than half an hour of bonus content every single week from as little as $1 an episode. You can do that by subscribing at patreon.com/NoRogan. Meanwhile, you can hear more from Cecil at Cognitive Dissonance and Citation Needed. And you can hear more from me at Skeptics with a K and the Skeptic Podcast. And we will be back next week for a little more of the No Rogan experience.
If you love the show, please rate and share it. If you want to get in touch with us, become a patron, or check out the show notes, go to knowrogan.com. KNOWROGAN.com.